am I going to do? Oh, hi. I'm sorry. Wasn't expecting anybody to be here. So, I guess, yeah, I promised I'd do another reading. I guess today we're doing it. Hold on one second. Let me get some pieces. Let's see. We did planning sessions last time. So we're on our fourth chapter for this book. So this will be the last one, and then we'll move over to Time is Changing. So let me grab a quick, this is my new book, World Mind. So get this one out, hopefully in the next year or two. Okay, so this is Cleo and Honey. The next morning after breakfast, Honey sat at the piano and played a while. I sat down in a comfortable chair and waited. When Honey had something on her mind, she generally played music to help her think. 2 Brahms concertos and several pieces by Saint-Saëns, and she slid off the stool and sat down opposite me. Then I wanted to take a trip by myself. I wasn't surprised, but I was curious. Where and when? About 50-something BC in Egypt. She looked at me expectantly as if to see if I could guess who she wanted to meet. So, you want to meet Cleopatra, do you? Honey sat back in her chair. Sure I do. She was a real pioneer. She ruled when it was assumed men should. She's supposed to be a good ruler, too, and well-liked. I'd like to meet her and find out more about her. Plutarch describes her, but doesn't say much else. I know there were others like Hespa before her, but for some reason I want to meet Cleo. What do you say? I didn't need to give it much thought. Sure, when do you want to go? I looked surprised. You're willing to let me do this on my own? I didn't understand, apparently. Honey, if you want to go alone, go alone. I'll be keeping an eye on you just as you would on me, or Scott would on either of us. Or do you want to do this completely on your own? Honey's eyes grew wide. I can do this completely on my own? I frowned a little. I'd rather you didn't. I would feel compelled to use the viewer, not out of fear you couldn't handle things, but because you just don't know what may happen, just as I would want you to do the same for me. However, if you are determined to want to do this completely solo, tell me so, and maybe we can work out a compromise. Honey got up and sat on my lap. I don't mind you watching. I'll feel more confident knowing there is someone there who can be there if I need help, especially if I really do get in trouble. I won't be ready for a while as I want to make some clothes and see if Sandy has any idea on money. Can I have one of the small gold bars? I went to the safe we had in the library and bought one to her. You're going to make Cleo a present? Honey didn't look up from the bar in her hands. I can't think of another way to meet her. If I bring her some things that look pretty, she might see me. I'll be in the lab for a while, sketching and molding. With Honey busy, I took one of the horses out for a ride. As usual, I went into the woods, and this time I made a beeline for where the animals had been kept. I couldn't see much from the remnants after all this time. I spent some time poking around, wandering a little farther than we had cleaned out. I found an area with large stones and slats of wood. Lifting a stone and cleaning the moss and dirt off, I saw scrawled, Emma Webster, 1772, R.I.P. I cleaned off the plot as best I could with my hands and went to the well and cabin for rags and water. I spent most of the rest of the day cleaning and repairing the cemetery. Then I dug a hole for Fess. He might not have been well liked, but he had died here and would be buried here. I found a stone scrawled in the same manner as the rest, Fess, 1804, R.I.P. I put posts at all 4 corners and put up a fence sometime soon. Riding home, I thought more about what we intended to do with the cabins. In fact, I was so deep in thought I didn't notice that I wasn't guiding the horse and he was heading for the house. Well, next thing I know, I was on my back and my horse was casually walking back to the barn. From inside, I heard Honey trying very hard to laugh quietly. I unsaddled my horse and fed and watered them both for the night. As I walked in front of the one I had been riding, he reached up and pulled me in with his head. We hugged and he apologized for dropping me on my butt. Walking into the house, I saw Honey in the kitchen, her shoulders still shaking with laughter. She pulled a lasagna and garlic bread out of the oven and cut about a slice for each of us. We stood in the kitchen and talked as we ate. Honey had made a few items but wasn't happy with any of them, so she planned on working on them again tomorrow. I was going to work on the village a bit and see what else it had to surprise us with. We were interrupted by a knock at the door. I was surprised to see Chris and someone else there. "Hey, Chris, what's up?" Chris wanted to know if he could see the village again. "This is Justin. He's going to be doing the cabins. We have the plans, but I want him to see the one remaining so he can finish his supplies list and get the feeling of the things." Justin shook my hand. "Just in time. At your service. You know, the hard part is knowing what trees you have surrounding so I can use the same wood for the cabins. May not be noticed to most people, but if the wood is wrong, something will feel off." I shook his hand warmly. "I like the way you think. I have the land across the road as well for about 125 acres worth, and it's all wooded too. There may be a possibility of using some of the trees to get your supplies." Justin asked if he could see the property. We still had a lot of daylight, so I got a couple of horses out, and Honey and Chris followed in the truck. Honey took Chris around and explained again the situation of buildings and what was important to us. I took Justin across the road and showed him the area he could pull from. I want to ensure I'm not disturbing anything that should be left alone. He examined the ground and surroundings for animal quarters and the trees that were there. We should be able to do this fairly easily, but I won't pull them all from the same area. We'll space it out so as to do as little damage as possible. We can cut and pull, then trim and split here. He pointed to the clearing next to the woods. I looked where he was pointing. I only have about 15 acres of this clearing, so you might be able to cut and work the wood here and then transport. He agreed. We're going to chop and split as we go so we don't take more wood than we need. Whatever remains, we can make a stand for and give you plenty of cut logs for the fireplaces. We'll place the stand above ground to keep out the insects as much as possible. I really liked the way he was thinking, and we shook hands again. Riding back, we stopped at the cabin and Justin looked around it as well as walked around the plot. I took the time to talk to Chris. I like the way Justin is going about this. He seems to be conscientious of land management and is a good fit for working with you. Chris smiled. "Yeah, he had no trouble for a while, but don't get enough opportunities to work together. He specializes in period reconstructions. This is something he is really excited to do, since it's being done from the ground up." Justin came back grinning like the cat who ate the canary. "With the plans you have and the cleaning you've already done, I can get the paperwork completed this week and start working about, 2? Would that be sufficient?" We all agreed to get this going as soon as possible. I was getting that excited feeling when a dream was about to come true. Now I'd get Mac on board for the dining hall contract and we'd be set. Honey's family completed the Greek dresses she needs and crafted enough jewelry that meets with her stringent approval on what is suitable to offer to Cleopatra. We told Scott about her intended trip and he wants to come up for it. And let's try adding a translator so we can research other times and countries. He asked that we put off their trip till tomorrow. Honey has agreed, but is anxious to get going, and I can't blame her. This will be her first time going on her own. Short hop to return the brooch, that didn't count. Hold on. Scott arrived here early this morning. I mean early. We came down and he had already made breakfast for all of us and had coffee going. I don't know when he came up, but it had to be after midnight. He is tied into the University of California in Berkeley. It has a language section second to none in his opinion. One of his friends has an Egyptian to English translator that he made years ago. He has it running into the soundboard with a branch program that works off of recordings of each of us, so what everyone says will come through in their own voices instead of robotic computerized ones. We ate quickly, and then Honey got changed and asked me to put the jewelry in her desk in the lab table into the box. I scurried to the lab and put everything into the box she had made as well, and the burl wood gleamed. Scott came over next and was doing the checks on Fred and the generator. He then ran the diagnostics as I made another pot of coffee. I almost dropped the pot when Honey came in. She was wearing an eggshell silk toga with clasps from jewelry she had made. On her head was a tiara that was both simple and elegant. I feared Cleo was in for some serious competition if any historian saw Honey. I handed her the casket of jewels and kissed her. She went to the viewer to pick a suitable location for her to drive at. She chose one close to the palace, but opposite to the city. She could approach almost unseen from this angle. Scott came down from the roof and saw Honey. Wow, Honey, Olivia must have looked like you do when she was your age. Go get him, kid. He turned to me. Don, may I have the honor of sending her through? I waved a hand in the direction of Fred, and with great ceremony he entered in the coordinates Honey had written down, opened the tab, and pressed. Honey stood still for a moment, took a deep breath, and walked through. I switched over to view mode, and Scott and I watched as she mounted the steps and was approached by a man in the uniform of a guard. We could see their lips moving, but no sound was coming out. Scott? I checked the control board, all as it should be. Scott went to Fred and began pulling out the board he had installed. I watched in silence as Honey was led down the hall, opened at the side where a long garden was in bloom. Honey practically glided as she walked, and I had a hard time focusing on the surroundings. She was led to another open area where Cleopatra was reclining on a couch reading a papyrus. Cleopatra saw Honey and rose gracefully and greeted Honey as an honored guest. I saw Honey seated across from Cleopatra on a slightly smaller couch. I turned to Honey almost in tears. Can we please get the sound on? Scott gave Fred a sharp smack with his hand, and at the same time a pop came over the speaker, and I heard Cleopatra's voice. It's totally bitchin' to see you, like, oh my God, you are so Betty. I turned to Scott. Can we get a translator for the translator? Scott turned red. Yeah, let me link up with a different file. Honey opened the casket and presented the Cleopatra the casket and jewels. Your Empress, these tripedular jewels are a present from my people to you. Cleopatra was admiring the jewels one by one and holding them to the light. They are totally zlint. I turned again to Scott working at the laptop. Scott, please, I don't understand anything I've heard yet. Scott was looking a little panicked. I think I have a better file. I'll kill Leo when I talk to him. He thought this was a huge joke. Cleopatra had laid out the jewelry on the table between her and Honey. Honey was making rapid inventory and saw one was missing. Oh, Lord, the ring I was most anxious to give you is missing, Honey exclaimed. I looked at the desk, and sure enough, it was there. I dropped it in on Honey's lap, startling Cleopatra. Does that sort of thing happen to you often? Honey blushed. It does when it is important enough. Our gods watch over us very closely. Cleopatra seemed intrigued. What else can they bring you? Honey became serious. We work to provide for ourselves, but when needed, we pray for our gods to intercede for us. Sometimes they will, sometimes they will not. It is truly in our best interest not to have a prayer answered. They won't, no matter how we plead. Cleopatra smiled. I've never seen a prayer answered so quickly before. I'm curious to see you accomplish it again. Honey turned slightly paler. It would depend on what you want, I guess. Cleopatra thought a moment. Will they bring you a fish that we might share a meal together? Honey muttered under her breath. Oh, you had to ask. Scott looked at me expectantly. Go ahead, I said, but be nice. Scott ran to the fridge and brought out a couple of fishes. You know, I think we may change our diet and eliminate fish altogether from now on. He set the crossover and gently laid a fish on Honey's head. As soon as she removed it, another appeared. Honey looked up. Thanks a lot, she said under her breath. Scott was rolling on the floor laughing. Cleopatra handed the fish to one of her companions and stood. Once standing again, it was easier to tell she was pregnant. Honey asked if she had chosen a name yet. Cleopatra placed a hand on her stomach. He will be named Caesarion after his father. She smiled, but her eyes took on a stern expression. His father is Caesar of Rome. He protected me when my brother tried to murder me and take Egypt for himself. Honey tried to change the subject after that one. I noticed preparations for a party later. Have I interrupted something? Cleopatra shook her head. Not at all. Today is the festival of Isis, the festival of lights. Today has been spent distributing sweets, beer, and extra lamp oil to our people. Tonight the gong on the top of this building will strike when the last rays of the sun are gone. The gongs on the temples will send the message, and all homes will light a lamp outside, which will be left glowing till morning. And they looked perplexed. Forgive the ignorance of a person from far away, but what do the lamps signify? Cleopatra turned and faced Honey. The festival celebrates the souls coming to Isis. It will start with the furthermost houses and temples and work towards here where I am. I represent Isis reborn. By the way, if you want one of these cups that have all my books on them, let me know. I think we can come to an arrangement. At least a shipping handle. Okay. Cleopatra turned around to the sorry. There was still half an hour before nightfall, and Honey saw people gathering. Sorry, I skipped a paragraph. As they talked, they climbed to the topmost part of the dwelling. Near a great gong was a throne with several smaller seats. Cleopatra sat on the throne, and several of her companions sat on either side. Cleopatra raised her hand, and the companion on her right rose and sat behind her. Honey was instructed to take her place. There was still half hour until nightfall, and Honey saw people gathered outside their dwellings, placing the lamps on posts or dangling them from hooks. Some placed more than one lamp on the roof of their houses. From where they sat, they could see the temple priests come out onto the roof of their temples, where the gongs were, stand waiting. As dusk began to fall, you could almost feel the tenseness as people stood in expectation. Cleopatra and all seated with her had their eyes trained to the west as the sun slowly descended. As the last rays dwindled in intensity, Cleopatra raised her hands. When the last glow was seen, she lowered them and the palace gong sounded. The gong was echoed by the temple gongs. I raised the viewer till I could see all around. From the farthest reaches, I could see lights begin to glow. As the outskirts began to glow brighter and moved towards the temple and moved forward, the temple braziers were lit in unison with the advance of the house lamps. The lamps and temple braziers continued slowly and steadily, making their way to the center where Cleopatra was. As the closest lamps were lit, there was a pause. Cleopatra turned around to the large brazier behind her. She raised both arms high, and a small torch was laid to the oil. A flame burst forth that illuminated an area at least 2 blocks in round. Loudly, Cleopatra intoned, Isis, the healer of Osiris, mother to us all, heal our land and make it plentiful. Make me a worthy mother to my people and protect us from invaders. From the 4 corners of the palace, blazers blossomed into light. Cleopatra sat back down, basking in the radiance of light as it flickered, sending dancing shadows everywhere. Honey was mesmerized by the scene before her. Scott and I pulled back farther and admired the scene below. Cleopatra rose and her shadow was cast onto a wall at the large building opposite. All around her, people emitted a cheer that must have been heard for miles. Down below, our viewer, who watches Cleopatra and her company, eventually rose and made their way down to the sleeping quarters. We dropped the viewer and followed in their wake. We emerged into a large chamber. On a raised dais was Cleopatra's bed. Hers was of teak wood with gold falcons at the corners, their wings unfolded and protective. To the sides were small beds for her companions. One was given to Honey for the night. An oil lamp was lit, and one of the companions played a lyre as everyone composed themselves to slumber. Honey crooked a finger, and I brought the viewer close to her. Good night, you two. Go get some sleep now, and don't be up all night talking. I whispered a good night, and we turned off the viewer, but left the sound on in case we were needed. Scott and I chatted a while over some scotch and sodas, reminiscing over old times and trips. I asked him if there was anything funny that happened lately in Rome. His smile widened into a grin. Well, I was going to save this for later, but it won't hurt to retell it again. Livia and I sleep together, but when we're sleeping, we both face away from each other. Cat Shadow likes to sleep between us, and sometimes, if it's cold, likes to sleep under the blanket. Well, a few nights ago, thanks to your deliveries, I was able to make some chili. Livia's become fond of it, as I am, and we both helped ourselves pretty liberally. We went to bed, and as it was chilly, Shadow got under the covers between us. Later on, Livia and I blasted that poor cat between us. That chili blast was so loud it even woke Linus up. The smell was pretty bad, too. That poor cat clambered out from under the blanket with the most offended look I've ever seen. He was so insulted he slipped up in the front room on a shelf by an open window. Scott and I clinked glasses, and he rose and stretched. Guess I'll head to the cabin. Good night. He stretched as he walked and, taking a flashlight, ambled over to the cabin. I pulled out the folded-up army cot from the closet and a sleeping bag from one of the tool shelves. At the cost of 2 pinches on my fingers, I finally got the cot erected and laid down to sleep. The motion sensor gradually dimmed the lights, and I fell fast asleep. I'd be guzzling this, but I don't want to burp. I was awoken to a soft voice coming over the return and clipped onto my arm. Good morning, lover. We're all awake and getting cleaned and oiled. I'll let you know when you can turn on the viewer. I was tempted to, but decided against turning everything on. Scott came in and had breakfast and a bag from Burger King. We ate to the sound of splashing and giggling from the return. After a while, Honey's soft voice came on again. Okay, you can look now. I flipped on the viewer just in time to see the ladies just lowering their garments over shapely legs. I detected a smile on Honey's lip that told me she had time to review her on just in time to tease us. We watched as they walked down to the dining room. Cleopatra led the way, and her retinue followed close behind. Cleopatra was holding Honey's hand and keeping her close to her. In the dining room, Cleopatra reclined on a couch with Honey seated at her feet. The rest of the ladies were seated on cushions on the ground. On the low table was brought seasoned pork cubes, goat, fava beans, and sauce. hummus, bread, loaves, and flavored oils to dip the bread in. As they ate, Cleopatra spoke to Honey. "What do you think of Egypt?" Honey looked embarrassed. "Well, I haven't seen much except the palace." Cleopatra nodded. "I thought as much. We'll take a ride after breakfast and go up the Nile. Egypt is far older than Rome and has been proud of her heritage. I've tried to do my best for my people, and I've done all my power to ensure they are secure." He looked at Cleopatra's slight bulge. Cleopatra noticed her glance. "Yes, even going so far as to carry Caesar's child. I don't know how things are done in your part of the world. We are rich in wealth, but poor in protection. Caesar needed our wealth, and we required his protection. I did what I had to do to secure his interest and commitment. Sometimes you gain more by simply swaying your hips than by long speeches and promises." And he nodded. "It also helps to be as beautiful as you are." Theo nodded in return. "True, but you seem like you could do as well in that respect." And he blushed. When they were done eating, everyone retired for putting the finishing touches on their toilets. One of Cleopatra's companions did Honey's makeup. When she was done, Honey looked up into the viewer. The effect set my heart racing. I can't talk. Honey went out into the throne room and waited by the open court for Cleopatra. One of her companions came and said Cleopatra was waiting for her on the royal barge and led her to it. The barge was a long, low vessel with rowers seated on either side and a canopied enclosure at the stern. On a chair was Cleopatra, and next to her was a similar chair, which was for Honey. Cleopatra's companions were seated on cushions on the deck. The rowers lowered their oars into the water, and the drummer began to beat time. I was fascinated the way the rowers performed. The first began his stroke, and in half motion the second started. Again at half motion, the third, and so down the line. What this did was create a fluid motion where the boat flowed down the river without the jerky motion so common when boats are rowed. One set of oars was always in the water. When it came to the last coming out, the first was going in. So a continual smooth motion was achieved. Cleopatra pointed. I swear to God, this is just tea. I've been up early, so forgive me. Okay. Cleopatra pointed out hippos, crocodiles, turtles, and other wildlife. Birds took wing as they passed, and in the distance, Honey could see the gazelles grazing. From a cage at the rear of the canopied area, one of Cleopatra's companions brought out a monkey, which she fed. She gave Honey some grapes and dates to feed it, and the monkey climbed in Honey's lap, eating and grinning at Honey for more. The boat stopped at the outskirts of Thebes. Honey was amazed at how large Thebes was. It took a while for her to realize just how old Egypt was. Thebes was once a center of government, but now it was a little more than a minor city. Most of the population was located near and around the Luxor temple. Honey stayed seated under the canopy, but sent one of her guards to escort Honey around. Now, if you want, you can look up Thebes on Google. Many of the temples and sculptures are still viewable and as majestic as when Honey was there. What she saw differently was that they were all painted, and the whole area was colorful. The word she used was vibrant. As she wandered in awe of her surroundings, she asked the guard about the buildings she could see. He pointed out the Temple of Hespha and the Temple of Karnak and Obelisk of Ramses. They were wandering far into the city when the guard reminded her that Cleopatra was waiting for them. They hurried back to the barge and returned in time for the evening meal. Honey was wondering what to do next when one of the companions of Cleopatra approached her. Noble guest, my name is Shion. Today is my day of leaving, and I am going to visit my parents in the city. If it would not offend you to visit us, we would be pleased to offer you dinner and a bed for the night. Honey grinned. I would love to go with you. Let me tell Cleopatra and I'll be right with you. Seeing Cleopatra was only too happy to let Honey go with her companion, as she had another visitor arriving that night who would be keeping her company. Honey was led by the hand out of the palace and down the side street. Shion led the way with a lamp taken from near the entrance of the palace. Several turns later, and they arrived at a mud and straw home. My father built this when I was born, and it has grown as our family has. I have 2 sisters and 1 brother. Would you wait out here for a moment? Shion went inside, but soon came back and brought Honey in. Everyone stood when Honey came in, but immediately sat back down. Everything inside was built as part of the house. The benches extended from the wall and were made of the same material as the house. They were made comfortable by the lambskin rugs lying on them. Honey was seated next to Shion's mother, Gamaliel. He was then introduced to the rest of Shion's family, her 2 sisters, Habiba and Mandisa, and her brother Tao. Shion's father was working in one of the temples, sculpting, and wouldn't be back tonight. Habiba and Mandisa set the table and called everyone in as soon as supper was laid. Tonight they were having preserved duck, vegetables, bread, and beer. Honey marveled at how much beer was drunk in Egypt. Everyone drank it practically all the time. Even kids were drinking it. As Honey ate, she looked around as discreetly as possible. The walls had shallow sculptures carved everywhere, which were painted in bright colors. From the dining area, which was between the front room and the kitchen, she could see small alcoves, which served as the sleeping quarters for the family. The bedding was placed in niches built into the wall. The floor was compressed dirt with a thin layer of plaster over it. Rugs of various animal hides covered it. On the shelves, again built into the walls, were tools that Honey believed belonged to the father, paintings on clay tiles, rolls of papyrus, and clay and wooden toys. On the wall was a reed pan flute. It was etched with designs and held a place of honor on the wall. After everyone ate, they sat in the front room and Shion told of all the latest palace gossip. The sisters told about all the gossip they had heard in the market, and Tao told how he was hunting for the antelope and almost bagged a heron for dinner instead of duck. He didn't end up catching anything except a turtle. Then he told a little about herself and how she made jewelry. She bought out a bag that was tied inside of her toga and gave presents to everyone. She was desperate looking for the jewelry, trying to find something that would be good for Tao. I found a ring that would be suitable for him and discreetly dropped it into the bag as close as I could so no one would see. I pulled it out with a sigh of relief and gave it to him. His was one of my rings, a seal ring with a recess of an owl on it. Honey asked if she could try the pan flute. It was taken off the wall, and though it made some sound, it wasn't what I would call music. Mandisa rose and requested it from Honey. Sitting on the floor, cross-legged, she placed the flute to her lips and closed her eyes. Suddenly the room was filled with music of a piercing sweetness. I recorded it, but I've not been able to find out any information on it, so it may have been a composition of her own. Scott fell asleep in his captain's chair listening. When she concluded, everyone went to their niche in the wall and went to sleep. Honey was given one near the sisters. I covered Scott and was going to bring on my cot when I heard Honey's voice softly from the speaker. Wake me in an hour and I'll leave and come back home. I set a timer for an hour and woke Honey. She made her bed up and left the sack of money and the rest of her jewelry in the bed. I turned off the lights in the lab and Honey found a safe spot to hit the return. left Scott sleeping in his chair and went home for a little together time. As we lay in bed, I asked Honey what she had discovered about Cleopatra. Well, she was a good leader, I think. She cared enough about her people to learn their language, which I consider a mark of respect, as she was an Egyptian. She did what she had to do to secure protection from Caesar. I don't think she loved him when she had his child. It was a practical way to secure his help and keeping it. I guess you could say she was that kind of a ruler. Practical and courageous enough to do what needed to be done, using whatever means would accomplish her goal. I think she loved Mark Antony, though. She was proud, but had much to be proud of. She knows quite a few languages and uses that talent for speaking with foreign dignitaries in their own language. She can put anyone at ease and treats people with civility. I respect her. As I lay there thinking about Honey's trip, I went over the trips I had taken. I've been to the Chicago's World's Fair twice, though only one really counted. Scott and I have been to Philadelphia and met Ben Franklin and John Adams. Also, we've been to Paris to the Moulin Rouge to see Mr. Joel the Farter. Honey had gone to see this as well with me. Scott and I went to New Salem to meet Lincoln. We'd also gone to his funeral. We had visited the past several times on our own property. Honey had gone to see Cleopatra and done so on her own. We've been to Egypt, Atlantis, Rome. I tried to determine what we might want to see next. Instead, I fell asleep. So that's it for this chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Next chapter is Out of the Ashes. That's where they rebuild the village. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But we're not reading it. Haha. If you want to read it, you got to buy the book. So I'll put a link where you can get it. And the next one is Time is Changing. Let's bring this up. No, I apologize. Time is Lost. Is the best book by no one. No, Time is Waiting. What am I doing? Yeah. Wait a second. I screwed up. Time is Once More is book 4. See, this is why on the cover it actually tells me which is book 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Because even I get confused. It's been a while since I actually wrote these. So we'll be doing Time is Once More. The first chapter on there is a trip to France. And that's where Honey and Don are going to be celebrating their anniversary again and going on a trip. Honey is French, hence her name Honeydew. And I think in this book they run into one of her relatives. So that will be interesting to see. Again, I appreciate you coming by. I appreciate you visiting and listening to these readings. If you like them, let me know. If you don't like them, let me know that too. As I said, if you want one of these mugs, let me know that. I don't know if I'll charge for anything but the shipping and handling. I think I've got a couple extra. But I appreciate you visiting. Take care of yourself, and I will see you. Today is Sunday, so Monday, Tuesday. Probably Tuesday is my early day, so I should be able to do another one then. And that's when we'll be doing Time is Once More, the 4th book in the series. I look forward to seeing you. Hope you'll join me again. Thank you again, and have a good day.